So the idea of this session is to provide a broad outline of your research process, potential biases we all are under in that process, and just explore that a bit further. So I think a good place to start would be a kind of fluffy topic, but I think sourcing ideas. So Keith, how do you come across new ideas? How do you know when you've found something you want to dive deeper on? How do you approach that?
It's actually changed over time. I mean, I started out as sort of a deep value investor. My background is doing business appraisals, so basically valuing private businesses. And when I started the fund, our approach was primarily to try and find companies that we thought were underpriced in the market given sort of the industry and countries they were operating in. But what's happened over time is I sort of dove more into, and thinking about what are the values of growth for businesses. And if you can identify what those values of those levers or particular the KPIs of growth of those businesses, what's caused by them, and looking at the change in growth over time, then you can, I think, get some real interesting, because looking at, I think, in terms of my sourcing process at this point, it's looking at businesses that have that kind of model and what other, it's primarily starting in the United States, since I'm familiar with the United States, but then finding that kind of model in another country or maybe another sector. I'll give you an example. It's probably easier to explain it this way. So if you look at like automobile dealers, they're basically in two businesses. They're buying and selling cars, and they're in a service business. And so over time, what's happened as these companies have sort of consolidated and gotten bigger, services become a larger and larger portion of their revenue, and so that's almost like recurring revenue business. And so I've looked at that and said, okay, there's some other things going on in the business where that sort of happens over time. And so then applying that, saying, okay, this happens in car dealers. Well, let's look at like truck dealers. Let's look at like RV dealers. Let's look at boat dealers, and sort of see what characteristics are associated with those. And then also some of the drivers of growth. One of the key things in automobile dealers in terms of driving going forward is M&A. And M&A can only happen in countries, where you've got willing buyers. So where you're going to find some really interesting, I think, auto M&A stuff is going to be in the United States. You're not going to find it in Germany, because in Germany there's not many willing willing sellers, In the United States, you'll find a number of willing sellers. So it really varies, but I think my process has really gone more to look at what are the underlying causes of growth, and then sort of saying, okay, let me try and find some change in that growth metric over time, and then sort of, basically buy it where I think it's a really decent price and the market isn't necessarily incorporating that growth aspect of the business or industry over time. So I think that's sort of an example of an evolution of the process, how it's evolved over time. So.
Yeah, sure. And I think for me, there's really two different approaches. There's the discovery of new ideas, and then the maintenance of existing ideas. Because I'm a little bit more special situation oriented, I'm always looking for new opportunities and catalysts or something that might have occurred that might be of interest or might be misunderstood. So my process is every morning I have an RSS feed. I have different keywords to that. I have different SEC filings. And the first, say, hour or two of the day, I'll just kind of scroll through. I subscribe to a bunch of blogs and research services and things like that as well. And, I'll just kind of scroll through there, have a cup of coffee, see if anything catches my eye to look at later. And I think that's pretty good for new ideas, combined with kind of a network, effect. I've had the fund for 10 years now. We've met a lot of great people, a lot of you in this room. So a lot of sharing ideas. If we find something interesting, we definitely utilize that resource. We can talk about maintenance ideas later. I think that might be something to bring up later. But I think the RSS feed and just quickly going through a lot of ideas and seeing just what catches your eyes from pattern recognition in the past.